Human. Baby spotted a choking bear cub and rushed it to the hospital. What happened next was shocking. Let us know where you're watching from. If you love my content, consider supporting it with a super thanks. Also, don't forget to like and subscribe. It'll help us to remain in touch with amazing people like you. The morning sun filtered through the thick pine trees surrounding the small cabin where Zara Chen lived with her 18-month-old daughter, Luna. The air smelled of fresh mountain dew and wildflowers. Luna sat on the wooden porch, her chubby fingers wrapped around colorful blocks, babbling in her own language as she played. Zara was inside the kitchen, washing dishes and humming softly. She could hear Luna's happy sounds through the open door. The peaceful mountain life was exactly what they needed after moving away from the busy city. Here, surrounded by nature, everything felt safe and calm. Luna suddenly stopped playing. Her big brown eyes focused on something moving at the edge of the forest. A small fuzzy creature stumbled out from behind a large oak tree. It was a tiny bear cub, no bigger than Luna herself. The cub looked confused and scared. Luna clapped her hands together and made excited sounds. She had never seen a bear before, but something about this little creature made her smile. The cub moved closer to the cabin, sniffing the air. Its movements seemed strange, jerky somehow. Then Luna heard a sound that made her tilt her head. The bear cub was making choking noises, desperate, gasping sounds that didn't seem right. The little animal's mouth was open, and it was pawing at its throat with tiny claws. Its eyes were wide with panic. Luna dropped her blocks and crawled to the edge of the porch. The bear cub fell to its side, still making those horrible choking sounds. Something was very wrong. Luna had never seen an animal in distress before, but her baby instincts told her this creature needed help. The cub's breathing became more labored. It rolled on the ground, trying to dislodge whatever was stuck in its throat. Luna watched with growing concern, her innocent heart filling with worry for this strange new friend. Without thinking, Luna began crawling down the porch steps. Her mother had always told her to stay on the porch, but this felt different. This felt important. The bear cub needed someone, and Luna was the only one who had noticed. As Luna got closer, she could see the cub's chest rising and falling rapidly. Its small paws were scratching at the dirt, and foam was forming around its mouth. The choking sounds were getting weaker, more desperate. Luna reached out her tiny hand toward the struggling cub. She had no idea what she was doing, but something deep inside told her to try. The bear cub looked into Luna's eyes, and for a moment everything else disappeared. Two babies, different species, connected by an invisible thread of understanding. From inside the cabin, Zara continued humming, completely unaware that her daughter was about to do something that would change their lives forever. The mountain morning remained peaceful and quiet, except for the soft sounds of a dying bear cub and the determined breathing of a human baby who refused to give up. Luna's small hand touched the bear cub's fur. It was softer than anything she had ever felt before, but also damp with sweat from the animal's struggle. The cub's eyes locked onto Luna's face, and something magical happened. The panicked animal seemed to calm down just a little bit. "Mama bear," Luna whispered in her baby voice, though she didn't really understand what she was saying. She had heard those words somewhere before, maybe in a story her mother read to her. The bear cub's breathing was getting worse. Luna could see its little chest moving up and down too fast. She remembered when her mother had patted her back when she was choking on a piece of apple last month. Maybe that would help this little friend too. Luna placed both her tiny hands on the bear cub's back and began patting it gently, the way her mother had done for her. Pat, pat, pat. Nothing happened at first. The cub's eyes were starting to roll back. Pat, pat, pat. Luna tried harder, using more force than her little arms usually could manage. Suddenly, the bear cub made a loud coughing sound. Something small and shiny flew out of its mouth and landed in the dirt nearby. The cub took a deep, gasping breath, then another. Its eyes became clearer, more focused. Luna clapped her hands together and laughed with joy. She had helped. The little bear was breathing normally now, but as she looked closer at what had come out of the cub's throat, her expression changed to confusion. It wasn't a piece of food or a stick like she might have expected. It was something that didn't belong in the forest at all. A small, twisted piece of metal with sharp edges. It looked like it had come from some kind of machine or tool. The bear cub slowly stood up on shaky legs. It looked at Luna with what seemed like gratitude, then nuzzled against her arm. Luna giggled and petted the soft fur on the cub's head. They sat together in the morning sun, two babies who had just shared something special. But Luna's happiness was interrupted by a new sound. Heavy footsteps were coming through the forest, getting closer and closer. The leaves rustled loudly as something big moved between the trees. The bear cub's ears perked up, and it made a small whimpering sound. Then Luna saw her. A massive mother bear emerged from the forest, standing on her hind legs to look around. She was enormous, with dark brown fur and eyes that were scanning the area frantically. When she spotted her cub sitting next to Luna, she let out a roar that shook the trees. Luna had never heard anything so loud and scary in her entire life. The sound made her want to cry, but she was too frozen with fear to make any noise at all. The mother bear dropped down to all fours and began running toward them, her heavy paws pounding against the forest floor. The little bear cub ran toward its mother, but instead of being relieved, the mother bear seemed even more angry. She sniffed her cub all over, detecting the strange human scent. Her eyes turned to Luna with a look that was both confused and threatening. Luna tried to crawl backward toward the cabin, but her little legs weren't fast enough. The mother bear was standing over her now, close enough that Luna could smell her wild, earthy scent. The huge animal lowered her massive head until she was face to face with the tiny human baby. For several long seconds they stared at each other. Luna's heart was beating so fast she thought it might burst. The mother bear's hot breath felt warm against her cheek. One swipe of those enormous paws could hurt Luna very badly. But then something unexpected happened. The bear cub walked over and sat down right between Luna and its mother. It looked up at the mother bear and made soft, contented sounds, as if it was trying to explain something important. The mother bear tilted her head, listening to her cub's sounds. She sniffed the air again, this time more carefully. She could smell her cub's fear from earlier, but also something else. Something that told her this tiny human had helped, not hurt, her baby. From inside the cabin, Zara's humming had stopped. She had just realized that she couldn't hear Luna playing anymore. "Luna," she called out, walking toward the front door. "Where are my giggles?" When Zara stepped onto the porch, she saw something that made her blood freeze. Her baby daughter was sitting on the ground just a few feet away from two wild bears. One was small and obviously young, but the other was a full-grown mother bear who could be extremely dangerous. Zara's first instinct was to scream, but something stopped her. The scene in front of her didn't look violent or threatening. Luna was sitting calmly, actually reaching out to pet the small bear cub. The mother bear was watching carefully, but she didn't seem aggressive. "Luna," Zara whispered, trying to keep her voice steady. "Come to Mama, slowly." But Luna didn't move. She was too fascinated by these new friends. The bear cub had curled up next to her, and its mother was lying down nearby, still watching but no longer standing in a threatening position. Zara's mind was racing. She had heard stories about bears attacking humans, especially when cubs were involved. But she had also heard stories about bears showing unexpected kindness. She didn't know what to do. As she watched, the bear cub suddenly started making those choking sounds again. Whatever Luna had helped with earlier wasn't completely fixed. The little animal began struggling once more, and this time the mother bear saw it happening. The mother bear immediately became agitated. She nuzzled her cub frantically, trying to help, but she didn't know what to do either. The cub was getting worse again, its breathing becoming labored and desperate. Luna seemed to understand what was happening. She crawled closer to the bear cub and began patting its back again, just like she had done before. But this time, nothing came out. The metal piece was gone, but something else was still wrong. Zara watched in amazement as her 18-month-old daughter tried to help a wild animal while its mother looked on. She had never seen anything like this in her entire life. Her baby was showing a kind of natural compassion that seemed to cross the boundaries between species. The bear cub's condition was getting worse. Its little body was shaking, and its breathing was becoming very shallow. Luna looked up at her mother with tears in her eyes, as if she was asking for help. "We need to get help," Zara said, more to herself than to anyone else. "That little bear needs medical attention. But how do you take a wild bear cub to get medical help? And what about the mother bear, who was clearly not going to let her baby go anywhere without a fight?" As if the mother bear understood Zara's words, she gently picked up her cub in her mouth and began walking toward the cabin. She stopped a few feet away and looked directly at Zara, then at Luna, then back at Zara again. "I think," Zara whispered in disbelief, "I think she wants us to help." The mother bear set her cub down gently and took a step back, never taking her eyes off Zara. The cub was breathing, but barely. Its small chest rose and fell in irregular patterns, and a strange blue tint was beginning to show around its mouth and nose. Zara had worked as a veterinary assistant before Luna was born. She recognized the signs of oxygen deprivation. Whatever had been lodged in the cub's throat had caused internal damage, or there was still something blocking its airway that Luna's patting couldn't dislodge. "We need to get to Dr. Williams," Zara said aloud, thinking of the only veterinarian within 50 miles of their mountain home. But Dr. Williams' clinic was in town, nearly an hour's drive away. And how exactly do you transport a wild bear cub with its protective mother? Luna crawled closer to the struggling cub and placed her tiny hand on its head. The little bear's eyes fluttered open and looked at her. Even in its weakened state, there seemed to be a connection between the two babies that Zara couldn't explain. The mother bear watched this interaction carefully. Then, in a move that defied everything Zara thought she knew about wild animals, the massive bear walked to Zara's old pickup truck parked beside the cabin. She stood up on her hind legs and placed her front paws on the tailgate, looking back at Zara meaningfully. "No way," Zara breathed. "You can't possibly understand what a truck is for." But the mother bear's behavior suggested otherwise. She climbed into the truck bed with surprising grace for such a large animal, then looked expectantly at her cub, who was too weak to move on its own. Zara's heart was pounding. Every logical part of her brain was screaming that this was dangerous and impossible. You don't just load wild bears into your truck and drive to town. But looking at the dying cub and her own daughter's tearful face, logic seemed less important than compassion. "Okay," Zara said, surprising herself with her decision. "Okay, we're doing this." She scooped up Luna with one arm and carefully lifted the bear cub with the other. The little animal was heavier than she expected, and its fur was now damp with sweat. Its breathing had become so shallow that Zara wasn't sure it would survive the drive. As she placed the cub in the truck bed next to its mother, the mother bear did something that brought tears to Zara's eyes. The large animal gently licked her baby's face, then looked up at Zara with an expression that seemed to say, "Please save my child." Zara strapped Luna into her car seat inside the truck's cab, then started the engine. The mother bear didn't seem afraid of the noise. Instead, she positioned herself protectively around her cub, bracing for the movement of the vehicle. The drive down the mountain was unlike anything Zara had ever experienced. She kept checking her rearview mirror, expecting to see the mother bear trying to jump out or becoming aggressive. Instead, she saw the massive animal holding her cub steady, her eyes constantly scanning the road ahead as if she understood they were racing against time. Luna babbled excitedly from her car seat, occasionally turning to look out the back window at their unusual passengers. She seemed completely unafraid, as if having wild bears in their truck was the most natural thing in the world. Halfway to town, something happened that made Zara's blood run cold. The bear cub stopped breathing entirely. She could see in her mirror that its small chest was no longer moving. The mother bear began making distressed sounds, nudging her baby frantically with her nose. Zara pulled over immediately and jumped out of the truck. The mother bear looked at her with desperate eyes, stepping aside to let Zara reach the cub. Without thinking about the danger, Zara climbed into the truck bed. The cub's lips were turning blue. Zara had seen this before in her veterinary work. She placed both hands on the cub's chest and began pushing rhythmically, performing CPR. 1, 2, 3, breathe. 1, 2, 3, breathe. The mother bear watched intently, somehow understanding that Zara was trying to save her baby's life. After what felt like hours, but was probably only minutes, the cub suddenly gasped and began breathing again. But as Zara leaned closer, she noticed something that made her stomach drop. There was blood coming from the cub's nose, and when she gently opened its mouth, she could see torn tissue in its throat. The metal object hadn't just been choking the animal. It had caused serious internal injuries. "We need to get there now," Zara said to the mother bear, as if the animal could understand her urgency. "Your baby is bleeding internally." They got back on the road, driving faster than Zara had ever driven in her life. The mother bear seemed to sense the increased urgency. She held her cub even more carefully, and her eyes never left her baby's face. As they approached the outskirts of town, Zara realized she had a new problem. How do you explain to people that you have wild bears in your truck? How do you convince a veterinarian to treat a wild animal that most people would consider dangerous? But before she could figure out those answers, something even more unexpected happened. Other vehicles began pulling over to let them pass. Word had somehow spread ahead of them. People were standing on the sidewalks, pointing and talking excitedly. At first, Zara thought they were afraid or calling the police. But as she drove through the main street, she realized that wasn't what was happening at all. People were holding up their phones, taking pictures and videos. Some were even cheering. A small crowd had gathered outside Dr. Williams's veterinary clinic. The elderly veterinarian himself was standing in the doorway, his medical bag in hand and a look of amazement on his face. Zara pulled up to the clinic and jumped out of the truck. "Dr. Williams, I know this is crazy, but this bear cub is dying, and its mother brought it to us for help." Dr. Williams had been practicing veterinary medicine for 40 years, but he had never seen anything like this. The mother bear was still in the truck bed, holding her unconscious cub, looking directly at him with eyes that seemed to be pleading for help. "Well," Dr. Williams said slowly, "I suppose we'd better see what we can do." But as he approached the truck, something happened that no one could have predicted. A black SUV with government license plates pulled up aggressively behind them. 3 men in dark suits stepped out, flashing badges. "Nobody move," one of them called out. "This is a federal wildlife situation. We're taking custody of these animals immediately." The mother bear sensed the change in atmosphere. She rose up protectively over her cub, letting out a warning growl that made everyone step back. The crowd that had gathered began murmuring nervously. "Sir," Dr. Williams said to the federal agent, "this animal needs immediate medical attention. Whatever your jurisdiction is, it can wait until after we save this cub's life." "I'm afraid that's not possible," the agent replied coldly. "These bears are evidence in an ongoing investigation. They need to come with us right now." Luna, who had been quiet in her car seat, suddenly began crying loudly. She had somehow sensed that these new people meant to separate her from her bear friends. Her cries seemed to trigger something in the mother bear, who became even more agitated. Zara looked back and forth between the dying cub, the distressed mother bear, the federal agents, and her own crying daughter. Nothing about this situation made sense anymore. "Investigation?" she asked. "What kind of investigation?" The lead agent looked at her with cold eyes. "Ma'am, that metal object your daughter removed from this cub's throat. It's not just any piece of scrap metal, it's a fragment from a military-grade tracking device. Someone has been using these bears for illegal experimentation." The crowd gasped. Dr. Williams stepped forward, his face pale. "Are you saying someone deliberately put that in the cub's throat?" "We believe these bears escaped from a classified research facility that was supposed to have been shut down years ago," the agent continued. "This cub and its mother are evidence of serious crimes against wildlife. They need to come with us for examination and testimony." The mother bear seemed to understand that these men meant to take her baby away from the people who had been helping. She stood up to her full height and roared, a sound so loud and powerful that car alarms began going off throughout the town. But then something extraordinary happened. Luna stopped crying and began making her own sounds from the truck cab. Not words, but a series of babbling noises that seemed to have rhythm and meaning. The mother bear immediately turned toward the sound, her aggressive posture softening. Luna was somehow communicating with the bear, and the bear was listening. What happened next would be talked about in that small mountain town for generations to come. Luna's babbling grew more complex, almost like she was speaking in a language that only the bears could understand. The sounds she made weren't random baby noises anymore. They had pattern, rhythm, and most incredibly, they seemed to have meaning. The mother bear's entire demeanor changed as she listened to Luna. Her aggressive stance softened, and she tilted her massive head as if concentrating on every sound the baby made. Then, to everyone's amazement, the mother bear began responding with her own sounds. Not roars or growls, but gentle huffing noises that matched Luna's rhythm. Dr. Williams stepped closer, his scientific mind reeling. "In 40 years of veterinary practice, I've never seen anything like this. It's as if they're actually having a conversation." The federal agents exchanged worried glances. The lead agent spoke quietly into his radio. "We have a Code 7 situation. The child appears to have developed enhanced communication abilities. Request immediate backup and containment protocols." Zara heard those words and felt ice-cold fear shoot through her veins. "Containment protocols? What are you talking about? That's my daughter?" "Ma'am, please step away from the vehicle," the second agent said, his hand moving toward his weapon. "Your daughter may have been exposed to experimental compounds that have altered her neurological development. She needs to be examined by our specialists." "You're not taking my baby anywhere," Zara shouted. But before she could move toward Luna, something incredible happened. The crowd of townspeople, who had been watching this unfold like spectators at a strange movie, suddenly stepped forward as one. Old Mrs. Henderson from the grocery store moved to stand beside Zara. Tom Mitchell, the town mechanic, crossed his arms and glared at the agents. Sarah Chen, the schoolteacher, positioned herself protectively near the truck. "You boys aren't from around here," Tom said in his gruff voice, "and we don't take kindly to strangers threatening our neighbors and their children." The lead agent looked around at the growing crowd with obvious frustration. "This is a federal matter. You people are interfering with a national security investigation." "National security?" Dr. Williams laughed bitterly. "You mean the national security that allowed someone to conduct illegal experiments on wild animals, the same experiments that nearly killed this innocent bear cub?" While the adults argued, something even more extraordinary was happening between Luna and the bears. The baby's communication with the mother bear had somehow revived the dying cub. The little animal's eyes fluttered open, and it began making the same soft sounds that Luna was making. A collective gasp went up from the crowd. The bear cub was not only breathing normally again, but it was sitting up and appearing to join the conversation between its mother and the human baby. Dr. Williams pushed past the federal agents and climbed into the truck bed for a closer look. What he saw made him question everything he thought he knew about animal behavior and communication. "The cub's vital signs appear to be stabilizing," he announced. "But more than that, there's something else. Look at its eyes." Everyone leaned in to see what he meant. The bear cub's eyes, which had been the normal dark brown of a young bear, now seemed to have flecks of gold in them. They looked more aware, more intelligent than before. "That's impossible," one of the federal agents muttered. But his voice lacked conviction. Luna reached out her tiny hand toward the cub, and the little bear gently pressed its nose against her palm. The moment they touched, both babies began glowing with a soft, barely visible light that seemed to emanate from within their bodies. The crowd fell completely silent. Even the federal agents stopped talking and stared in wonder at what they were witnessing. "Dear God," whispered Mrs. Henderson, "what did that research facility do to these poor creatures?" The lead federal agent's radio crackled to life. A voice came through clearly enough for everyone to hear. "Agent Morrison, abort the retrieval mission. The subjects have entered Phase 3 development ahead of schedule. Maintain observation distance only. Do not engage." Agent Morrison pressed his radio button. "Sir, the civilian population has been exposed. The child appears to have bonded with both subjects. What are your orders regarding witnesses?" The response sent chills through everyone present. "Eliminate all trace evidence. Implement Protocol 07. The crowd began murmuring anxiously. Tom Mitchell stepped forward, his face red with anger. "Did that son of a gun just order you to hurt innocent people?" "Sir, please step back," Agent Morrison said, but his voice had lost its authority. He was clearly uncomfortable with whatever orders he had just received. Dr. Williams stood up in the truck bed, still amazed by what he was seeing between Luna and the bears. "Agent Morrison, before you do anything you might regret, let me tell you what I'm observing here. This isn't just some scientific anomaly. This little girl and these bears have formed a bond that appears to be healing trauma and enhancing natural abilities. Whatever those criminals did to these animals, this child's pure heart is helping to reverse it." The mother bear seemed to understand that the people in dark suits were a threat. She moved protectively over both her cub and Luna, creating a living barrier between them and the agents. But then Luna did something that changed everything. She looked directly at Agent Morrison and spoke her first clear word. Not Mama or Data like most babies her age, but something entirely different. "Help," she said clearly, her voice carrying far more weight and emotion than should have been possible for an 18-month-old child. Agent Morrison's professional facade cracked. He looked at this tiny human baby who was somehow communicating not just with wild bears, but with his own heart. His radio crackled again with impatient demands for status updates, but he ignored it. "Agent Morrison," came the stern voice through the radio. "Report your status immediately." Morrison looked around at the crowd of ordinary people who had formed a protective circle around a baby and two bears. He thought about his own daughter at home, only a few months older than Luna. He thought about the orders he had been given and what kind of person follows orders to harm innocent children. Slowly, Agent Morrison reached up and turned off his radio. "Sir, what are you doing?" asked one of his subordinates. Morrison looked at the dying bear cub, now miraculously healthy and communicating with a human baby. He looked at the mother bear, who had trusted humans enough to ask for help. He looked at Luna, whose innocent eyes seemed to see straight into his soul. "I'm doing the right thing," he said quietly. Then, louder, so everyone could hear, "Doctor Williams, what does this bear cub need to make a full recovery?" The crowd erupted in cheers, but their celebration was short-lived. More black SUVs were pulling up to the clinic, and these new arrivals didn't look like they would be as easily swayed by conscience. A woman in a white lab coat stepped out of the lead vehicle. She was tall, thin, and had eyes that seemed to calculate rather than see. Behind her came 6 armed guards in military fatigues. "Agent Morrison," the woman called out in a voice like ice. "Step away from the test subjects immediately. You are relieved of duty." "Test subjects?" Zara repeated in horror. "You mean my daughter and these bears?" The woman smiled, but it was the kind of smile that made everyone step back. "Mrs. Chen, your daughter has been exposed to compounds that have accelerated her neural development beyond normal human parameters. She now possesses abilities that make her extremely valuable to national defense research. The bears are carriers of the same enhancement protocols. All 3 subjects need to come with us for proper study and containment." "Over my dead body," Zara said, surprising everyone with the steel in her voice. "That can be arranged," the woman replied coldly. But as the armed guards began to advance, something happened that no one could have predicted. Luna's connection with the bears suddenly expanded. The soft glow that had been barely visible around the baby and the cub suddenly flared brighter. And the mother bear began to glow as well. The light grew stronger and stronger until everyone had to shield their eyes. When it finally faded, they saw something that would haunt their dreams and inspire their hopes for the rest of their lives. Luna was no longer just sitting in her car seat. She was floating 6 inches above it, still holding hands with the bear cub, who was also floating. The mother bear stood beneath them both, her eyes now completely gold, looking more intelligent and aware than any wild animal should be capable of. The woman in the lab coat stared at this impossible scene with fascination rather than fear. "Remarkable," she breathed. "The bonding process has accelerated beyond our wildest projections. This is even better than we hoped." "What have you done?" Dr. Williams demanded. "What kind of experiments were you conducting on these innocent animals?" The woman's smile grew wider and more frightening. "Dr. Williams, what we've done is create the next stage of evolution, both human and animal consciousness enhanced through targeted genetic modification. Your little town has just become the birthplace of a new species." Luna, still floating in her impossible position, looked directly at the woman and spoke again. This time, her voice carried an otherworldly quality that made everyone present feel like they were in the presence of something sacred and powerful. "No hurt?" Luna said, and though she was still just a baby, her words seemed to carry the weight of absolute authority. The armed guards who had been advancing suddenly stopped in their tracks, as if an invisible force was holding them back. Their weapons seemed too heavy to lift, and confusion spread across their faces. "Impossible," the woman whispered, but her scientific excitement was overriding her shock. "The psychic manifestation is already active. This is unprecedented." What none of them realized was that Luna's transformation was just the beginning. The real shock was about to come from a source none of them expected. Dr. Williams, who had been quietly observing the floating baby and bears, suddenly staggered backward as if he had been struck by lightning. His weathered face went completely pale, and his hands began trembling uncontrollably. "No," he whispered, his voice barely audible. "It can't be, not after all these years." The woman in the lab coat turned her attention to him, her calculating eyes narrowing. "Dr. Williams, you seem distressed. Do you recognize something about these manifestations?" Dr. Williams looked at Luna, still floating peacefully with the bears, then at the woman, then back at Luna again. His professional composure cracked completely, and tears began streaming down his face. "I know what you did," he said, his voice growing stronger with each word. "I know exactly what you did, because I helped create it. 25 years ago, I was part of the team that developed the enhancement protocols you used on these bears." The crowd gasped collectively. Zara stared at the veterinarian she had trusted, the man who had delivered Luna when she was born right here in his clinic during that terrible snowstorm 18 months ago. "Dr. Williams," Zara said slowly, "what are you talking about?" The old veterinarian's hands were shaking so badly he could barely speak. "Project Genesis. It was supposed to be terminated in 1999. We were trying to create enhanced intelligence in animals for search and rescue operations. But the military applications, they wanted to weaponize it. I quit the project and destroyed all my research. I thought it was over." The woman in the lab coat smiled coldly. "Dr. Marcus Williams, lead geneticist on Project Genesis. We've been looking for you for a very long time. Did you really think you could hide in this little mountain town forever?" "Hide?" Dr. Williams laughed bitterly. "I wasn't hiding, I was repenting. I was trying to do good with the rest of my life after what we created." Agent Morrison, who had been listening to this exchange with growing horror, stepped forward. "Dr. Williams, are you saying you know what's happening to Luna?" Dr. Williams nodded slowly, his eyes never leaving the floating baby. "The enhancement compounds we developed were designed to be triggered by extreme emotional stress and the presence of similarly affected subjects. Luna's exposure to the bears, combined with her desire to help them, activated dormant modifications in her genetic structure." "What modifications?" Zara demanded, her voice rising with panic. "What did you do to my daughter?" "I didn't do anything to Luna specifically," Dr. Williams said quickly, "but the compounds we developed had an unexpected side effect. They could be passed through genetic inheritance, remaining dormant for generations until the right trigger activated them." The implications of his words hit everyone at the same time. Zara stared at Dr. Williams with dawning horror. "You're saying Luna inherited this from someone? From who?" Dr. Williams closed his eyes as if the truth physically hurt him. "Zara, I need to tell you something about your family history that you never knew. Your father wasn't just a park ranger like your mother told you. He was one of our test subjects in the early phases of Project Genesis." The world seemed to stop spinning. Zara felt like she couldn't breathe. "My father? But he died when I was 3. Mom said it was a hiking accident." "It wasn't an accident, Doctor," Williams whispered. "He was murdered by government agents when he tried to expose what we had done to him. Your mother brought you here to hide, and I've been protecting you ever since, waiting and watching to see if you would develop any abilities." The woman in the lab coat had been listening to this revelation with obvious satisfaction. How touching. A family reunion. "Dr. Williams, you've saved us years of research by confirming the genetic inheritance pattern. Now we can collect all 3 generations of test subjects." 3 generations? Zara repeated in confusion. "Your father, you, and now Luna," the woman explained with clinical detachment, "though it appears the abilities have become significantly more powerful with each generation. Luna is potentially the most important scientific discovery of the century." But as she spoke, Luna's floating height began to increase. The baby rose higher and higher, still holding the bear cub, while the mother bear began to glow even brighter. The connection between all 3 of them was creating some kind of energy field that was affecting everyone present. The townspeople who had gathered around the clinic began experiencing strange sensations. Mrs. Henderson found that she could suddenly understand what the stray cats around her grocery store were thinking. Tom Mitchell discovered he could sense the emotional state of every person in the crowd. Sarah Chen began having vivid flashes of memories that didn't belong to her. "What's happening to us?" someone in the crowd called out. Dr. Williams watched in amazement and terror as Luna's abilities began spreading to everyone within a certain radius. The enhancement field is expanding. Luna's powers are awakening dormant genetic potential in everyone around her. The woman in the lab coat was frantically taking notes and measurements with devices pulled from her coat pockets. Incredible. The subject is creating a localized evolution event. The applications for this phenomenon are limitless. But her excitement was interrupted by Agent Morrison, who was experiencing his own transformation. The hardened federal agent found himself overwhelmed with empathy for every person and animal in the area. He could feel their fear, their love, their hope, and their pain as if they were his own emotions. "This is wrong," he said, tears streaming down his face. "What we're doing here, what we've been ordered to do, it's all wrong. These aren't test subjects or weapons. They're living beings with feelings and rights." The other federal agents were experiencing similar awakenings. One by one, they lowered their weapons and stepped back, unwilling to threaten the baby who was teaching them what it meant to truly feel compassion. But the woman in the lab coat seemed immune to Luna's influence. If anything, she became more focused and determined. Fascinating. The subject appears to be selectively affecting individuals based on their capacity for empathy. Those with stronger emotional barriers remain unaffected. She pulled out a radio and spoke into it with urgent excitement. "Command, this is Dr. Evelyn Cross. The Genesis subject is exceeding all projections. Request immediate deployment of containment units with psychic shielding. We need to capture this specimen before it creates more widespread genetic activation." Dr. Williams heard the name, and his face went white with recognition. "Evelyn Cross. You were my research partner. I thought you died in the lab fire." Dr. Cross smiled with genuine warmth for the first time, though it made her look even more frightening. "Marcus, dear Marcus, always so naive. There was no lab fire. I simply eliminated the ethical members of our team and took the research underground. I've spent 25 years perfecting what we started." "You killed our colleagues?" Dr. Williams stepped toward her, anger overriding his fear. "You murdered Dr. Chen, Dr. Rodriguez, Dr. Kim." "They lacked vision," Dr. Cross replied casually. "They couldn't see the potential of what we were creating, but I could. I've been breeding enhanced subjects for decades, waiting for one powerful enough to trigger mass evolution events." Luna, still floating high above them with the bears, suddenly turned her attention to Dr. Cross. The baby's eyes, which had been warm and innocent, now carried an otherworldly intelligence that seemed far older than her 18 months of life. "Bad lady," Luna said, and her voice carried such authority that everyone present felt compelled to step away from Dr. Cross. But Dr. Cross wasn't intimidated. Instead, she pulled out a device that looked like a cross between a gun and a satellite dish. "Subject Genesis Prime. You will come with me willingly, or I will be forced to use electromagnetic pulse restraints to disable your abilities." She pointed the device at Luna, but before she could activate it, something extraordinary happened. The mother bear, who had been protectively stationed beneath the floating baby and cub, suddenly spoke in perfect English. "You will not harm the child," the bear said in a voice that was unmistakably female, intelligent, and filled with maternal fury. The crowd erupted in shocked exclamations. Even Dr. Cross took a step backward in surprise. Dr. Williams stared at the speaking bear with recognition dawning in his eyes. "Ursa 7. You're one of our original test subjects from 1998. But that's impossible. You should have died of cellular breakdown years ago." The mother bear turned her golden eyes toward Dr. Williams. "I remember you, Doctor. You were kind to me when the others were not. You tried to stop the painful experiments." "Ursa 7 died in captivity," Dr. Cross interjected, though she looked shaken by the bear's ability to speak. Her cellular structure couldn't handle the genetic modifications. "Ursa 7 did die," the bear agreed sadly, "but her consciousness was transferred to this body through methods your limited science cannot understand. The child's presence has awakened memories and abilities that were dormant for decades." Luna giggled and patted the bear's head affectionately, apparently delighted that her friend could now talk to everyone else too. But their reunion was interrupted by the sound of helicopters approaching. Dr. Cross smiled triumphantly as military aircraft appeared on the horizon. "Enhanced containment units," she announced. "These helicopters are equipped with psychic dampening fields and electromagnetic capture nets. Your little evolution party is about to come to an end." As the helicopters grew closer, Luna's floating began to falter. The energy field that had been emanating from her and the bears started to weaken. The townspeople who had been experiencing enhanced abilities found their new senses fading. "The dampening field is working," Dr. Cross said with satisfaction. "In approximately 60 seconds, all subjects will return to baseline capabilities and be ready for extraction." But what Dr. Cross didn't know was that Luna's connection to the bears had awakened something much larger than just their small group. Deep in the forest around the town, other animals who had been exposed to enhancement compounds over the years were beginning to stir. A pack of wolves with unusually intelligent eyes emerged from the tree line. A family of deer with golden antlers stepped into the town square. An enormous eagle with wingspan far larger than any natural bird circled overhead. All of them were converging on the veterinary clinic, drawn by the same force that had brought the mother bear and her cub to seek help from humans. The real shock wasn't what had happened so far. The real shock was that Luna hadn't just healed one bear cub. She had awakened an entire ecosystem of enhanced animals, and they were all coming to protect the human baby who had shown them that trust between species was possible. Dr. Cross looked around at the approaching animals with growing alarm. "This wasn't in any of our projections. The activation field was supposed to be limited to a 100-meter radius." Dr. Williams, watching the gathering of enhanced animals with awe and terror, made a realization that chilled him to the bone. "Evelyn, what have you done? How many animals did you experiment on over the years?" Dr. Cross's confident expression cracked slightly. "The project required extensive testing. We needed to perfect the formulas. There may have been several hundred subjects released into various wildlife preserves over the past 2 decades. Several hundred? Agent Morrison repeated in disbelief. You mean there are hundreds of enhanced animals living in the wild? The sound of the approaching helicopters was getting louder, but it was now competing with the symphony of animal calls from the forest. Howls, roars, chirps, and sounds that no natural animal should be able to make were echoing through the valley. Luna, despite the weakening effects of the dampening field, managed to speak one more time. Her voice was fading back to that of a normal baby, but her words carried a message that everyone present would remember forever. "Friends coming," she said simply, pointing toward the forest. And she was right. The friends were coming, and they were bringing with them a reckoning that would change everything anyone thought they knew about the relationship between humans and the natural world. As the enhanced animals emerged from the forest in greater numbers, something miraculous began to happen. Instead of chaos or violence, a profound peace settled over the town square. The wolves sat calmly beside the deer. The great eagle landed gently on Dr. Williams's shoulder. A family of raccoons with unusually bright eyes gathered around Luna's truck, looking up at the floating baby with obvious affection. The military helicopters hovering overhead found their dampening equipment suddenly malfunctioning. Not because of any aggressive action, but because Luna's connection with the animals was creating a field of pure love and understanding that technology simply couldn't suppress. Dr. Cross frantically worked her instruments, but every device was failing. "This is impossible," she muttered. "Electromagnetic fields can't be disrupted by emotional resonance." But Dr. Williams understood what was happening. Through his tears, he smiled for the first time in 25 years. "Evelyn, you never understood the real power of what we created. It was never about enhanced intelligence or psychic abilities. It was about enhanced empathy. Luna isn't controlling these animals. She's loving them, and they're loving her back." Luna slowly descended until she was sitting normally in her car seat again, the bear cub curled contentedly in her lap. The mother bear nuzzled both babies gently, her golden eyes soft with gratitude. Agent Morrison stepped forward, his weapon lowered permanently. "Dr. Cross, I'm placing you under arrest for conducting illegal experiments on wildlife and humans, murder of federal researchers, and conspiracy against the United States." Dr. Cross looked around wildly as her own agents moved to surround her instead of the townspeople. The enhanced empathy field had awakened their consciences, and they could no longer follow orders that went against basic human decency. "You don't understand," Dr. Cross protested as they cuffed her. "This child could be the key to human evolution. We could create a world where humans and animals communicate perfectly, where we could solve environmental problems, where we could learn to love each other instead of exploit each other," Dr. Williams interrupted gently. "Yes, Evelyn, that's exactly what Luna is teaching us. But it can't be forced or weaponized. It has to come from the heart." The townspeople, their temporary enhanced abilities fading but their expanded compassion remaining, began approaching the gathering of animals without fear. Mrs. Henderson offered crackers to a family of enhanced squirrels. Tom Mitchell found himself in deep conversation with a wise old owl who seemed to understand his every word, even if it couldn't speak back. Sarah Chen sat peacefully among a group of forest cats who purred with contentment. Zara finally climbed out of the truck and gently lifted Luna from her car seat. The baby giggled and reached toward the bear cub, who nuzzled her hand one more time before returning to its mother's side. "What happens now?" Zara asked Dr. Williams. "Luna still has these abilities. People will want to study her, use her." Dr. Williams looked at the peaceful scene around them. Humans and animals coexisting in perfect harmony, even if only temporarily. Now we protect her. All of us, this town, these animals, Agent Morrison and his team. We create a sanctuary where Luna can grow up safely and where enhanced animals can live without fear of exploitation. Agent Morrison nodded firmly. I'll make sure the federal government classifies this entire area as a protected wildlife preserve. No more experiments, no more hunting enhanced animals. This becomes a place of healing. The mother bear, Ursa 7, approached Zara and spoke one final time before her enhanced speech abilities faded. Thank you for raising a child with such a pure heart. She saved my baby's life, but more than that, she saved my faith in humans. I will watch over her as she grows, and she will always have the protection of the forest. As the sun began to set over the mountain town, the enhanced animals gradually returned to the forest. But they didn't go far. The wolves established a den just beyond the town limits. The great eagle built a nest on the clinic's roof. The deer family took up residence in the meadow behind Zara's cabin. Luna's floating abilities faded as she returned to being a normal 18-month-old baby. But the connection she had forged with the animal world remained. As she grew older, she would become known as the bridge between worlds. A child who could communicate with animals not through supernatural powers, but through pure, unconditional love. Dr. Williams spent his remaining years treating both domestic and wild animals in his clinic, which became a place where enhanced and normal animals alike could receive care without fear. He never again participated in experiments, choosing instead to dedicate his life to healing the damage he had once helped create. The town itself became a destination for people seeking to understand the connection between humans and nature. Scientists came to study, but they found that Luna's gift couldn't be replicated in laboratories. It could only be learned through patience, kindness, and an open heart. Years later, when Luna was old enough to understand her story, she would sit on the same porch where she first saw the choking bear cub and tell visitors about the day she learned that the most powerful force in the universe isn't technology or genetic enhancement. It's love. The bear cub, now fully grown but still gentle as ever, would often visit that porch. Sometimes Luna would ride on his back through the forest, surrounded by their extended family of enhanced animals who had chosen to stay near the girl, who had shown them that trust between species wasn't just possible, it was beautiful. And in the quiet moments of those peaceful mountain evenings, if you listened carefully, you could still hear the soft sounds of different species talking to each other in a language that needed no words, the universal language of compassion that Luna had helped them all remember. The metal fragment that had nearly killed the bear cub was eventually identified as part of a tracking device, but it was also transformed into something else. A reminder that even the cruelest human inventions could be overcome by the simple act of one baby refusing to let a fellow creature suffer alone. In the end, Luna's story became legend, not because she had supernatural powers, but because she proved that the most ordinary act, reaching out to help someone in need, could create the most extraordinary change in the world. The choking bear cub had been saved, but more importantly, everyone who witnessed Luna's compassion had been saved too. They had been reminded of who they could be when they chose love over fear, protection over exploitation, and healing over harm. And that, more than any scientific experiment or government conspiracy, was the real miracle that happened on that quiet mountain morning when a human baby spotted a choking bear cub and decided that all life was worth saving.